What if some of the decisions you make every day aren't really as independent as you think? Imagine walking into a store with absolutely no intention of buying anything. You are simply looking. Then someone offers you a free sample. You accept it. Nothing seems unusual. But a few minutes later, when that same person recommends a product, saying no suddenly feels a little uncomfortable. Why? You weren't planning to buy anything. Nobody forced you. And yet, something changed. That tiny free gift created a feeling that you should give something back. This is the strange world of influence. Robert Cialdini spent years studying why people say yes, even when they originally planned to say no. And what he discovered reveals something uncomfortable about human psychology. We like to believe that our decisions come from careful thinking. But much of the time, our brains use shortcuts. Those shortcuts make life easier. They also make us predictable. And once you understand those patterns, you begin noticing them everywhere.
Influence doesn't only happen when someone is trying to sell you something. It happens when a friend asks for a favor, when a manager gives you advice, when thousands of people suddenly start buying the same product, when someone you like makes a recommendation, when an expert speaks with confidence, or when someone tells you this opportunity won't be available for long. Each situation can trigger a different psychological response. And here's what makes influence so powerful. You usually don't feel influenced. You feel like you're simply making a reasonable decision. That's the key. The most effective persuasion doesn't always feel like pressure. It feels natural. It feels obvious. It can even feel like your own idea. Cialdini identified 6 major principles that repeatedly shape human behavior: reciprocity, commitment and consistency, social proof, liking, authority, and scarcity. These principles are not magic tricks. They are psychological tendencies built into ordinary human behavior. And once you understand them, you can become better at influencing others ethically, while becoming much harder to manipulate yourself.
Let's begin with something almost everyone understands: the feeling that you owe someone something. Imagine a colleague helps you finish an important task. A week later, that colleague asks you for a favor. You might agree. Not necessarily because the favor is convenient, not even because you particularly want to do it. You agree because something inside you says, they helped me. I should help them. That feeling is reciprocity. When someone gives us something, we naturally feel pressure to return the favor. It is one of the foundations of human cooperation. Without reciprocity, relationships would become difficult. If people never returned kindness, favors, or support, trust would weaken. So this tendency is useful. But useful psychological mechanisms can also be exploited. A person doesn't always have to ask for something directly. Sometimes they give first. A gift, a compliment, a free sample, a small favor. And then they wait. Because once you've received something, saying yes to the next request can...
This is why free samples are so effective. You walk through a supermarket. Someone offers you a small taste of a product. You accept. It costs you nothing. But psychologically, the situation has changed. Before the sample, you were simply a customer walking past. After the sample, there is a tiny social connection. They gave you something. Now you may feel slightly more willing to listen, and perhaps slightly more willing to buy. The important point isn't that every free sample is manipulation. It isn't. Sometimes it is simply good marketing. The deeper lesson is that generosity can change our behavior, even when we believe we're acting independently. The same thing happens in everyday life. Someone buys you lunch. Someone gives you useful advice. Someone helps you move. Someone does you a small favor. Later, when they need something, your brain remembers. And suddenly, saying yes feels like the fair thing to do. That's why reciprocity is so powerful. It doesn't usually feel like pressure. It feels like fairness. But what happens when the favor wasn't really free? Imagine someone spends 30 minutes helping you choose a product. You never asked for that much assistance, but now you feel uncomfortable leaving without buying. You might think, they spent all that time with me. Your decision is no longer based only on the product. A psychological debt has entered the conversation. This is where awareness becomes useful. The next time someone gives you something before asking for something in return, pause. Ask yourself, if they had given me nothing, would I still want to say yes? That question can separate genuine desire from obligation. And there's another important lesson. You are allowed to appreciate someone's kindness without accepting their request. Gratitude does not require obedience. Someone can give you something, and you can still decide that their next request isn't right for you. That isn't selfish. It's independent judgment. Reciprocity is healthy when it creates mutual support. It becomes dangerous when someone deliberately creates a sense of debt and then uses that debt to control your decision.
Now consider something even more interesting. What happens when you don't just receive something, but make a commitment? This brings us to the second principle, commitment and consistency. Human beings have a powerful desire to remain consistent with what they have already said and done. Once we publicly commit to something, changing our mind can become uncomfortable. We want our behavior to match our previous decisions. Think about someone who tells their friends, "I'm going to exercise every morning." The next day, skipping the gym isn't simply skipping a workout. It can feel like breaking a promise. The statement has become part of their identity. They don't just want to exercise, they want to remain the kind of person who exercises. This is why small commitments can become powerful. A person agrees to something small, then something slightly larger, then something larger again. Each step feels reasonable, but together, the steps can lead somewhere the person never originally intended to go. And that's where influence becomes subtle. The first yes can make the second yes easier. Imagine someone asks, "Do you care about protecting the environment?" Most people would probably say yes. Then they ask you to sign a petition. You sign. Later, they ask you to attend a local event. You agree. Then they ask you to donate. The requests gradually become larger. But because you've already identified yourself as someone who supports the cause, saying no becomes psychologically harder. Your mind wants consistency. It wants your actions to match your identity. This can be used positively. If you want to become healthier, begin building evidence that you are a healthy person. If you want to become a reader, read regularly. If you want to become disciplined, keep small promises to yourself. Every action becomes evidence. But the same mechanism can trap you. You may continue defending an old decision simply because admitting you were wrong feels uncomfortable. You may stay in a bad situation because you already invested so much. Consistency can be useful.
Think about the last time you continued something simply because you had already invested in it. Maybe a job you no longer wanted, a relationship that wasn't working, a course you stopped enjoying, a project that clearly wasn't going anywhere. You might think, "I've already spent so much time on this." But the time is already gone. The money is already spent. The energy is already used. Continuing doesn't bring those resources back. Yet the mind often treats past investment as a reason to invest even more. This is closely related to the sunk cost effect. We confuse consistency with commitment. We think changing direction means admitting failure. But sometimes changing direction is the smartest decision available. A powerful question is, if I were making this decision today, knowing everything I know now, would I choose the same thing? If the answer is no, your past commitment may be controlling your present. You are not required to remain loyal to a decision simply because an earlier version of you made it. Sometimes growth means becoming comfortable with changing your mind.
Now let's look at one of the strongest forces in social life, social proof. When we're uncertain, we look at other people. We ask, what are they doing? Because if many people are choosing something, we assume they probably know something we don't. Imagine walking down a street and seeing two restaurants.
One is almost empty. The other is crowded. Without tasting either restaurant's food, which one feels safer? Most people will instinctively choose the crowded one. The crowd becomes evidence. This shortcut is often useful. If everyone suddenly runs away from a building, you probably shouldn't calmly walk inside. Other people's behavior can contain valuable information. But social proof becomes dangerous when we confuse popularity with truth. A product can be popular and still be poor quality. An idea can go viral and still be false. Thousands of people can believe something and still be wrong. Popularity is information. It is not proof. And once you understand that distinction, you become much harder to influence through the crowd alone.
Social proof becomes even stronger when we're uncertain. If you already know what you want, other people's opinions matter less. But when you're confused, you look outward. This is why reviews are so powerful, why follower counts matter, why bestseller labels influence purchases, why videos with millions of views can feel more trustworthy than videos with 50 views. The number becomes a shortcut. But there is a problem. Sometimes the crowd is simply copying itself. Imagine one person looks toward the door. Another person notices and looks too. A third person sees two people looking and follows. Within seconds, an entire room is staring at the door, even though nobody knows what they're looking for. The group appears to have evidence, but the evidence came from the group itself. This happens online too. People see thousands of reactions and assume the information must be important. But sometimes the reactions are the only reason the information became important. So whenever you hear everyone is doing it, ask yourself, what do I actually know? This is also why your environment has enormous psychological power. Spend enough time around people who value learning, and learning begins to feel normal. Spend enough time around people who exercise, and exercise becomes part of the environment. Spend enough time around people who constantly complain, and complaining can start to feel normal too. We often think our habits are purely personal. They aren't. Human beings are social creatures. We observe what is normal around us, then unconsciously adjust. This can work for you or against you. If you want to change your behavior, sometimes changing your environment is more effective than trying to rely on willpower. Make the behavior you want to repeat visible. Make the behavior you want to avoid inconvenient. Surround yourself with people whose standards support the person you want to become. Because eventually, what feels normal around you can begin to feel normal inside you. And once something feels normal, you rarely question it.
The next principle is something you've probably experienced without realizing it: liking. We are more likely to say yes to people we like. That seems obvious, but look at what creates that feeling. We tend to like people who are attractive, friendly, familiar, similar to us, people who make us laugh, people who compliment us, people who seem to understand us. And once we like someone, their recommendations can suddenly feel more convincing. Think about a conversation where someone discovers that you share the same hobby. The mood changes. You feel connected. You may trust them more. But the shared hobby doesn't tell you whether their recommendation is good. It simply makes the messenger feel familiar. This is why you should separate the person from the proposal. Ask yourself, do I like this person? And then ask, is what they're offering actually good for me? Those are different questions. A charming person can make a terrible offer. A difficult person can give excellent advice. Our emotions don't always make that distinction automatically.
Now we reach authority. Human beings naturally respect expertise, and for good reason. We cannot personally understand everything. If a doctor explains a medical issue, we rely on their training. If an engineer explains a structural problem, we trust specialized knowledge. If a pilot gives instructions during an emergency, following those instructions may protect everyone. Authority makes complex life manageable. But our brains sometimes make a dangerous shortcut. We confuse the appearance of authority with actual expertise. A title, a uniform,
a confident voice, an expensive office, a famous name, a professional-looking image. These signals can make someone appear credible before they've provided any evidence. And confidence can be especially persuasive. Someone who speaks with certainty can feel more knowledgeable than someone who carefully explains uncertainty. But confidence is not competence. A person can sound completely certain and still be wrong. Another person can be extremely knowledgeable and still say, "I'm not sure." Sometimes uncertainty is actually evidence of intellectual honesty.
This becomes especially important online. A successful entrepreneur gives financial advice. A celebrity talks about psychology. An athlete promotes a health product. An influencer gives relationship advice. Because the person is successful in one area, we instinctively transfer that credibility into another. But expertise is specific. Being excellent at one thing doesn't automatically make someone an expert at everything. So before trusting someone's authority, ask 3 questions. What exactly are they qualified to talk about? Is that expertise relevant to this particular decision? And what evidence supports the claim? These questions sound simple, but they become difficult when someone is impressive. The more impressive the messenger appears, the easier it is to forget to examine the message. Authority should help you evaluate information. It shouldn't replace evaluation. A famous person can be wrong. An unknown person can be right. The truth does not become more accurate because the speaker has a better title. And sometimes, the most intelligent thing you can say is, "Let me check."
Now we come to perhaps the most emotionally powerful principle: scarcity. We tend to want things more when they become difficult to obtain. A product says, "Only 3 left." Suddenly, you want it. A website says, "Offer ends tonight." Suddenly, you feel urgency. Someone tells you, "This opportunity may never come again." Suddenly, missing it feels painful. Notice what changed. The product didn't necessarily become better. The opportunity didn't necessarily become more valuable. What changed was your perception of access. Scarcity creates the possibility of loss, and humans are extremely sensitive to loss. We don't just think, "What will I gain?" We also think, "What will I lose if I don't act?" That question can change behavior dramatically. Suddenly, an ordinary decision feels urgent, and urgency can reduce careful thinking. You stop asking, "Do I really want this?" and start asking, "What if I miss my chance?" That is where scarcity becomes powerful. Now we come to perhaps the most emotionally powerful principle: scarcity. We tend to want things more when they become difficult to obtain. A product says, "Only 3 left." Suddenly, you want it. A website says, "Offer ends tonight." Suddenly, you feel urgency. Someone tells you, "This opportunity may never come again." Suddenly, missing it feels painful. Notice what changed. The product didn't necessarily become better. The opportunity didn't necessarily become more valuable. What changed was your perception of access. Scarcity creates the possibility of loss, and humans are extremely sensitive to loss. We don't just think, "What will I gain?" We also think, "What will I lose if I don't act?" That question can change behavior dramatically. Suddenly, an ordinary decision feels urgent, and urgency can reduce careful thinking. You stop asking, "Do I really want this?" and start asking, "What if I miss my chance?" That is where scarcity becomes powerful.
There is another psychological force underneath scarcity: freedom. When we feel that an option is disappearing, we can want it more simply because our freedom to choose it is being reduced. Imagine someone tells you, "You can have this whenever you want." It feels ordinary. Now imagine they say, "You can have this only today." Your attention changes immediately. The object is identical. Your freedom isn't. This is why limited editions, exclusive memberships, countdown timers, and temporary offers work so well. But there is an important distinction. Real scarcity is information. Artificial scarcity is manipulation. If a website constantly tells you there are only 2 items left, but never actually runs out, the urgency is being manufactured. So before acting on scarcity, ask, would I still want this if it were available tomorrow? If the answer is yes, perhaps the opportunity has genuine value. If the answer is no, perhaps what you really want isn't the product. Maybe you simply don't want to feel that you've missed something. And fear of missing out is not the same as desire.
These 6 principles become even more powerful when they work together. Imagine an online product page. You see thousands of reviews. Social proof. A famous expert recommends it. Authority. The seller gives you a bonus. Reciprocity. A countdown timer appears. Scarcity. The brand tells you that thousands of people have already joined. Social proof again. A friendly influencer explains how much they love it. Liking. And after you've clicked I'm interested, the platform keeps reminding you about your earlier decision. Consistency. None of these signals alone has to force you. Together, they can create a powerful psychological environment. And this is why modern persuasion can feel so invisible. Nobody needs to say, you must buy this. Instead, the environment keeps giving your brain reasons to say yes. The important lesson isn't that businesses are evil. Businesses need persuasion. The important lesson is that you should know when your environment is influencing your decision. Once you see the mechanisms, you can step outside them.
Think about social media. A post has millions of likes. You become curious. A creator you already like recommends something. You trust the recommendation more. A comment says, everyone needs this. Social proof. The creator appears confident and knowledgeable. Authority. Then you see, available for 24 hours. Scarcity. Perhaps you click. And once you've shown interest, the platform continues presenting similar content. Now, consistency enters the picture. The technology is modern, but the psychology is ancient. Human beings have always looked to other people for information. We've always trusted familiar people. We've always respected authority. We've always valued things that seemed rare. We've always felt pressure to return favors. The difference is scale. Technology can now trigger these principles repeatedly, hundreds of times a day. And because the triggers are built into the environment, you may not even notice how often they are influencing you.
This raises an important question. If influence is everywhere, how do you protect yourself without becoming suspicious of everyone? The answer is not paranoia. It's awareness. You can accept a gift and still make your own decision. You can respect an expert and still check the evidence. You can like someone and still disagree with them. You can notice that thousands of people love something and still decide it isn't right for you. You can recognize a limited opportunity and still take time to think. Awareness creates a small gap between the trigger and your response. That gap is incredibly valuable because when the trigger and the response become automatic, someone else can shape your behavior. But when you notice the trigger, you have a choice. You don't need to eliminate your instincts. You need to become conscious enough to decide when those instincts deserve to be followed. That is the real purpose of understanding persuasion. Not becoming impossible to influence, but becoming difficult to influence unconsciously. One of the simplest defenses is surprisingly powerful. Delay. When someone creates urgency, give yourself time. When someone gives you a compliment before making a request, wait. When a crowd becomes excited, step back. When you receive an offer that seems impossible to refuse, sleep on it. Time changes emotional intensity. The offer that felt irresistible at 8 o'clock tonight may feel ordinary tomorrow morning. The fear of missing out may disappear. The excitement may fade. And when emotion becomes quieter, your judgment has more room. This doesn't mean every decision should take days. Some decisions genuinely require speed. The point is to recognize when urgency is coming from reality and when urgency is being created by another person. If someone says, you have to decide right now, ask yourself,
Why? Is there a real deadline? Or is the deadline simply a persuasion technique? Sometimes the fastest way to protect your freedom is to refuse to make a decision while someone else is rushing you.
Another powerful defense is simply naming what is happening. Someone gives you a gift, and you recognize reciprocity. Someone reminds you that you already agreed, and you recognize consistency. Someone says everyone else is doing it, and you recognize social proof. Someone makes you feel special before asking for something, and you recognize liking. Someone uses impressive credentials instead of evidence, and you recognize authority. Someone creates artificial urgency, and you recognize scarcity. Naming the principle doesn't make you immune, but it changes your position. You're no longer simply experiencing the influence, you're observing it. And observation creates choice. It's like turning on a light in a dark room. The objects were already there, but now you can see them. This is one of the most useful psychological skills you can develop. Learning to notice what is happening inside your own mind while it is happening. Instead of asking only, what should I do? You begin asking, why do I suddenly want to do this? That second question can completely change your decision. There is also a positive side to understanding these principles. Influence isn't inherently manipulative. Every human interaction contains influence. A teacher influences a student. A parent influences a child. A leader influences a team. A friend influences a friend. A good communicator influences people to consider a new perspective. The ethical question isn't, am I influencing someone? The better question is, am I respecting their freedom while doing it? Ethical influence gives people useful information. It doesn't hide important facts. It doesn't create false urgency. It doesn't exploit fear. It doesn't make people feel trapped. If your product is genuinely valuable, you don't need to lie about scarcity. If your advice is genuinely useful, you don't need to pretend to be an expert. If your relationship is genuine, you don't need psychological tricks to control the other person. The strongest long-term influence is often trust, and trust cannot be built through manipulation for very long. Think about someone you genuinely trust. Why do you trust them? Probably not because they always convince you. Maybe you trust them because they tell you the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. They don't pressure you. They allow you to disagree. They admit when they don't know something. They don't make every conversation about getting something from you. They respect your choices. That is powerful influence. When someone knows you won't punish them for saying no, their yes becomes meaningful. This is an important difference between persuasion and manipulation. Manipulation needs the other person to lose awareness. Ethical influence can survive awareness. You can explain exactly why you're recommending something and still allow the other person to choose. That kind of influence builds relationships instead of consuming them. So if you ever use the principles from this book, use them to communicate more clearly. Use them to make genuine value easier to recognize. Use them to help people make decisions that actually benefit them. Influence becomes powerful, but character determines how you use it. Now, bring these ideas into your own life. Think about the decisions you've made recently. Did you buy something because you genuinely wanted it, or because someone gave you something first? Did you continue something because it was still right, or because you had already invested so much? Did you believe something because it was true, or because everyone around you believed it? Did you agree because the person had good reasoning, or because you simply liked them? Did you trust someone because they had relevant expertise, or because they looked impressive? Did you want something because it was valuable, or because you were afraid it would disappear? These questions can be uncomfortable, but they reveal something important. Influence isn't something that happens only to careless people. It happens to intelligent people. It happens to educated people. It happens to successful people. And this is where Cialdini's ideas become much bigger than sales psychology. They become a lesson in self-awareness.
Because every decision contains two questions. What am I choosing? And why am I choosing it? Most people ask only the first. They focus on the outcome. Should I buy this? Should I accept this job? Should I trust this person? Should I join this group? Should I say yes? But the second question is often more revealing. Why do I want this? What triggered the desire? What information am I relying on? What emotion is involved? What would I choose if the pressure disappeared? The more important the decision, the more valuable these questions become. You don't need to analyze every cup of coffee or every small purchase. But when something involves significant money, relationships, career decisions, or commitments, a few seconds of reflection can protect you from a decision you later regret.
There's another subtle lesson here. We often think manipulation requires intelligence, but sometimes it only requires understanding human nature. A person doesn't have to control your mind. They only need to create the right conditions. Give first. Create commitment. Show the crowd. Build connection. Appear authoritative. Create scarcity. Then let your own psychology do the rest. That's why awareness matters so much. The manipulator may not even have to lie. They may simply arrange the situation so that your automatic response becomes predictable. And once you understand this, you begin looking beyond the words. You notice the environment. You notice the timing. You notice what happened immediately before the request. You notice what emotion appeared. You notice what information was emphasized and what information was left out. Influence is often hidden in context. Sometimes what isn't being said is just as important as what is.
Consider how this applies to relationships. Someone does something kind for you. You feel grateful. Then they repeatedly remind you of what they did. The kindness becomes a debt. Or someone constantly tells you how much they admire you, and then asks you to prove your loyalty. Or a partner says, "Everyone agrees with me." Now social proof enters the relationship. Or someone uses their position to tell you, "I'm the expert here. You don't understand." Authority becomes a weapon. Or they threaten to withdraw affection unless you agree. Scarcity appears emotionally. These situations may not look like traditional persuasion, but the psychological principles are still there. Understanding them can help you recognize unhealthy dynamics earlier. You can ask, am I agreeing because this is genuinely what I want? Or am I agreeing because I am afraid of losing something? That distinction can protect your independence. Healthy relationships allow people to say no without making love, respect, or belonging conditional.
The workplace is another place where influence operates constantly. A manager asks you to stay late. You remember that they helped you last month. Reciprocity. A team has already agreed to a strategy, so nobody wants to question it. Consistency. Everyone else supports the idea, so you assume it must be correct. Social proof. A colleague you like suggests something, and you become more receptive. Liking. A senior executive speaks confidently, and everyone stops questioning the proposal. Authority. A manager says, "This opportunity is available only to people who act now." Scarcity. None of these principles is automatically bad. They become useful when they help people cooperate, but they become dangerous when people stop thinking independently. A healthy workplace needs more than persuasion. It needs disagreement. People should be able to question decisions without being punished, because sometimes the person who says, "Wait," is the person protecting everyone else from a bad decision. The workplace is another place where influence operates constantly. A manager asks you to stay late. You remember that they helped you last month. Reciprocity. A team has already agreed to a strategy, so nobody wants to question it. Consistency. Everyone else supports the idea, so you assume it must be correct. Social proof. A colleague you like suggests something, and you become more receptive. Liking. A senior executive speaks confidently, and everyone stops questioning the proposal. Authority. A manager says,
This opportunity is available only to people who act now. Scarcity. None of these principles is automatically bad. They become useful when they help people cooperate, but they become dangerous when people stop thinking independently. A healthy workplace needs more than persuasion. It needs disagreement. People should be able to question decisions without being punished, because sometimes the person who says, "Wait," is the person protecting everyone else from a bad decision.
The same principles explain why some marketing campaigns feel almost impossible to resist. A brand gives you a free trial. You begin using the product. Now you have invested time. Consistency. The company shows thousands of positive reviews. Social proof. An influencer you already follow recommends it. Liking. A professional-looking expert supports it. Authority. Then a message appears. Your special price expires tonight. Scarcity. And suddenly, buying feels like the natural next step. Notice what happened. No single message had to convince you completely. Each psychological signal simply pushed the decision a little further. This is why persuasion can be cumulative. One small influence creates another, and eventually, the combined effect becomes much stronger than any individual technique. The lesson isn't to stop buying things. It's to recognize when several psychological triggers are pointing in the same direction. When you see multiple signals working together, slow down. That is often when independent judgment matters most.
But there is a deeper question. Why did evolution give us these shortcuts in the first place? Because life is complicated. You cannot personally investigate every product, every person, every claim, every opportunity, every social situation. Your brain needs efficient ways to decide. If someone has helped you before, trusting them makes sense. If many people suddenly run away, paying attention makes sense. If an experienced expert gives relevant advice, listening makes sense. If something is genuinely rare, recognizing its value makes sense. These shortcuts aren't flaws. They are adaptations. The problem is that modern environments can exploit them at a scale our brains weren't designed for. A human mind evolved to navigate small communities. Now the same mind faces billions of signals, notifications, advertisements, algorithms, reviews, influencers, countdowns, endless choices. The psychological machinery is old. The environment is new. And that mismatch creates opportunities for influence on a scale previous generations could never have imagined.
So the goal isn't to become completely rational. That's impossible. Human beings are emotional. We use shortcuts. We respond to people. We want belonging. We fear loss. We seek consistency. We trust expertise. These tendencies aren't going away. The goal is to know when to pause. If a decision is small, let your instincts work. If a decision could significantly change your life, slow down. If someone is pressuring you, create distance. If the emotional reaction feels unusually strong, be curious. Strong emotion doesn't automatically mean the decision is wrong, but it is a reason to investigate. Ask yourself, what would I choose if I weren't afraid? What would I choose if nobody knew? What would I choose if there were no deadline? What would I choose if this person weren't flattering me? What would I choose if everyone else disagreed? These questions strip away psychological noise. And underneath the noise, you may discover what you actually want.
Perhaps the most powerful skill you can develop is not persuasion, but psychological distance. You can be inside an experience and still observe yourself. You feel the urge to buy. Notice it. You feel obligated. Notice it. You feel the pressure to fit in. Notice it. You feel impressed by someone's confidence. Notice it. You feel afraid of missing an opportunity. Notice it. That simple act of observation creates space. And inside that space, you can choose. You don't have to fight the feeling. You don't have to pretend it isn't there. You simply don't have to obey it immediately. This is what self-awareness looks like in practice. Not knowing everything about yourself, but noticing yourself in real time. And the more often you practice, the easier it becomes. Eventually, you start recognizing the pattern before it finishes. You notice the trigger before the automatic decision arrives. There is also something deeply empowering about understanding why other people behave the way they do. You stop taking every behavior personally. Someone may be using social proof because they're uncertain. Someone may seek authority because they are afraid of making the wrong decision. Someone may be overly consistent because changing their mind threatens their identity. Someone may chase scarce opportunities because they fear loss. Understanding psychology doesn't excuse bad behavior, but it gives you context, and context can make you a better communicator. Instead of asking, "How do I force this person to agree?" you can ask, "What information would genuinely help them make a good decision?" That's a completely different approach. It respects the other person's intelligence, it preserves their freedom, and it creates something more valuable than a temporary yes: trust. Because a person who agrees freely is much more valuable than a person who agrees because they were psychologically cornered. Now, imagine applying all 6 principles ethically. Give value before asking for value. That is reciprocity. Help people make commitments that genuinely support their goals. That is consistency. Show real evidence that others have benefited. That is social proof. Build genuine relationships. That is liking. Demonstrate real expertise rather than pretending. That is authority. Explain genuine limitations without manufacturing urgency. That is scarcity. Notice what changes. The principles remain, but the intention changes. You aren't exploiting psychological weaknesses. You're making useful information easier to understand. You're reducing uncertainty. You're helping the right person make a decision. This is the difference between manipulation and ethical persuasion. Manipulation says, "How can I make them say yes?" Ethical influence asks, "How can I help them understand enough to choose?" The first focuses on control. The second focuses on clarity. And over time, clarity builds stronger relationships than control ever can. By now, you may start noticing influence in places you never considered before. The restaurant with the longest line. The product with thousands of reviews. The person who seems incredibly confident. The friend who reminds you of everything they've done for you. The website counting down the final minutes. The influencer you already feel connected to. The manager whose title makes everyone stop questioning. These ordinary moments become psychological clues, and that changes how you move through the world. You become more curious. You notice patterns. You pause before reacting. You ask better questions. And perhaps most importantly, you become less judgmental about your own decisions. Because once you understand these principles, you realize that being influenced doesn't mean being stupid. It means being human. Everyone uses shortcuts. Everyone responds to social pressure. Everyone wants to belong. Everyone can be persuaded. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is awareness. So the next time someone gives you something, notice reciprocity. The next time you feel committed to an old decision, notice consistency. The next time everyone seems to agree, notice social proof. The next time you instantly trust someone because you like them, notice liking. The next time an impressive person speaks, notice authority. The next time something suddenly becomes desirable because it's disappearing, notice scarcity. Then ask one simple question. Would I still choose this without the psychological trigger? If the answer is yes, great, choose it confidently. But if the answer is no, you have discovered something important. The decision may not have been entirely yours, and now you have the opportunity to take it back. That's the power of understanding influence. Not becoming immune to human psychology, but becoming conscious enough to decide when you want to follow it. There is one final idea worth remembering. You will never live in a world without influence. People will persuade you. Advertisements will attract you. Friends will shape you. Experts will guide you. Crowds will affect you. Technology will learn your preferences. And sometimes you will make decisions automatically. That's okay. The goal isn't to become suspicious of life. The goal is to become awake inside it. Know when you are being influenced. Know why something feels urgent. Know why someone feels trustworthy. Know why you suddenly want what you didn't want 5 minutes ago. And when the decision matters, pause. Because between the psychological trigger and your response, there is a small moment. That moment may last only a few seconds, but inside those seconds, you have something incredibly valuable. Choice. Maybe that's the real lesson of influence. It isn't simply a book about how to persuade other people. It's a book about understanding yourself. Why do you say yes? Why do you trust? Why do you follow? Why do you stay consistent? Why do you fear missing out? Why does popularity feel like evidence? Why does a free gift create an obligation? These questions reveal the hidden machinery behind everyday decisions. And once you can see that machinery, you become more deliberate. You can accept influence when it serves you. You can reject it when it doesn't. You can persuade others without exploiting them. You can communicate without manipulating. You can build trust without creating fear. And you can make decisions that feel more genuinely your own. Because freedom isn't the absence of influence. True freedom is knowing what is influencing you and still being able to choose. So the next time you hear everyone is doing it, pause. The next time someone says, only today, pause. The next time someone gives you something and immediately asks for something back, pause. The next time a person impresses you with confidence or status, pause. The next time you feel pressure because you already said yes, pause. And the next time you find yourself thinking, I have to do this, ask, do I? That tiny question can create distance between influence and action. It gives your reasoning a chance to catch up with your emotions. And sometimes, that's all you need. You don't need to become an expert in manipulation. You simply need to become an expert observer of your own mind. Because when you understand the patterns, you stop being surprised by them. And when you're no longer surprised, you become much harder to control. And perhaps the most beautiful part is that understanding influence can improve the way you treat other people. You become more patient. You listen more carefully. You stop assuming that disagreement means stupidity. You understand that people make decisions through emotion as well as logic. You recognize that fear can look like stubbornness. Uncertainty can look like hesitation. The need for belonging can look like agreement. The need for consistency can look like defensiveness. Human behavior becomes less mysterious and more understandable. That understanding doesn't mean you should manipulate people. It means you can communicate with greater empathy. You can explain instead of pressure. You can guide. If you take only one lesson from this book, let it be this. Your automatic reaction is not always your final decision. You can feel obligated and still say no. You can feel excited and still wait. You can admire someone and still question them. You can see a crowd moving in one direction and still choose another path. You can want something badly and still ask whether you actually need it. You can respect authority without surrendering your judgment. You can recognize scarcity without allowing fear of loss to control you. You are not required to obey every psychological signal your brain produces. You can notice the signal and choose. That is where awareness becomes freedom. And perhaps that is what makes understanding human behavior so powerful. The more you understand your mind, the more deliberately you can live. Because every day, thousands of small decisions shape your life. What you buy, Who you trust, what you believe, who you listen to, what you agree to, what you continue, what you walk away from. Most individual decisions seem insignificant, but together, they become your life. That is why understanding influence matters. Not because you should question every tiny decision, but because some decisions deserve more awareness than others. The next time something feels unusually urgent, slow down. The next time someone seems unusually persuasive, look beyond the personality. The next time everyone agrees, look for independent evidence. The next time you feel that you owe someone, remember that gratitude and obligation are not the same thing. And the next time you catch yourself saying yes automatically, give yourself permission to ask why. That small pause can protect an enormous part of your future. Maybe the most important thing you can do after learning these principles is simply become curious. Curious about advertisements, curious about conversations, curious about your own reactions, curious about why certain people instantly gain your trust, curious about why certain opportunities suddenly seem irresistible, curious about why you sometimes defend decisions you secretly know were wrong. Don't judge yourself. Study yourself. That change in attitude is powerful. Instead of saying, "Why am I so easily influenced?" ask, "What happened inside my mind just now?" Instead of, "I can't believe I fell for that," ask, "What psychological principle was operating?" Every mistake becomes information. Every interaction becomes an opportunity to learn. And gradually, you become better at recognizing the invisible forces shaping your decisions. You don't become emotionless. You become more conscious. And consciousness gives you something that persuasion cannot easily take away: the ability to choose deliberately.
So think about the 6 principles one final time. Reciprocity, the feeling that we should give something back. Commitment and consistency, the desire to behave in ways that match what we've already said or done. Social proof, the tendency to look to others when we're uncertain. Liking, the tendency to trust people we feel connected to. Authority, the tendency to follow those we perceive as credible or knowledgeable. Scarcity, the tendency to value things more when access appears limited. These principles aren't good or bad by themselves. They are tools. And like any tool, their impact depends on how they are used. They can help people communicate. They can help businesses explain value. They can help leaders motivate. They can also be used to manipulate. Your responsibility is not to control every influence around you. That's impossible. Your responsibility is to understand enough so that when influence appears, you can recognize it. Then decide.
And maybe that's the question worth carrying with you after this video. Not, how can I become impossible to influence, but how can I become more conscious of what influences me? Because influence will always exist. The world will always be trying to get your attention. People will always want something. Companies will always want you to buy. Groups will always want you to join. Experts will always want you to trust them. And opportunities will always appear to be disappearing. You cannot control all of that, but you can control the moment when you decide yes, or no, or not yet. That moment may seem small, but your life is built from moments like that. One decision, then another, then another. And eventually, those decisions become your direction. Understanding influence helps you make sure that direction is actually yours.
So perhaps the greatest lesson isn't about persuasion at all. It's about awareness. The next time someone gives you something, notice the feeling of obligation. The next time you feel committed to an old decision, ask whether it still deserves your loyalty. The next time the crowd tells you what to believe, look for your own evidence. The next time you instantly trust someone,
separate liking from truth. The next time authority speaks, listen, but think. And the next time something becomes valuable simply because it may disappear, ask yourself, would I want this if I knew I could have it tomorrow? These questions won't make you immune to influence, but they can make you conscious. And consciousness creates choice. You don't need to become colder. You don't need to distrust everyone. You simply need to become more awake to your own mind. Because the moment you understand what is influencing you, you get something back.
And perhaps that's where this journey ends. Not with the promise that you will never be persuaded again, but with the confidence that you can notice persuasion when it happens. You can accept a gift without feeling trapped. You can change your mind without feeling weak. You can disagree with the crowd. You can question authority. You can walk away from artificial urgency. You can like someone without surrendering your judgment. And you can influence other people without manipulating them. That is the real power of understanding human behavior. Not controlling others, but understanding yourself well enough to choose consciously. If this book changed the way you see your everyday decisions, don't let the idea disappear when this video ends. Think about one moment today when you felt influenced, and ask yourself why. If you enjoyed this summary, like the video and subscribe for more psychology, human behavior, self-improvement, and powerful book summaries. And remember, the next time you are about to say yes, pause. Ask why. Sometimes